And looks like we're live. Here we go. Excellent. Sorry for the slight delay. There's a little technical glitch, but looks like we've got that worked out now. Hello, everybody. This Thursday, and it's time for our weekly Anchore open source gardening session. My name's Dan. We've got the whole team online today. We've got Will, got Chris, got Keith, and Alex. We're the folks that work on Anchore's open source tools and technologies. Typically, we'll talk about any and all things SBOM, open source software, supply chain security, compliance, vulnerability scanning, those types of topics. And it's great for folks who are joining today. Generally, we can get started. Normally, we'll go through and talk about interesting community issues, things in our projects that are marked with needs discussion in particular, place we typically go. But sometimes the discussion will go this way and that. But yeah, let's get started. First, I wanted to ask if the team here had any particular topics they wanted to cover before we jump over to the needs discussion labels. I think, Will, you'd brought one up that you might want to discuss.
Yeah, so the particular issue I shared is the feature request in Syft to make nice dependency graphs. And me and T, we have some dependency graphs for some ecosystems, and that's awesome. But what I really wanted to talk about today was using this in Grype and being able to say sort of like what to upgrade in Grype, because I think one of the things that can happen is I have a super old Node project or Django project or something, and I point Grype at it, and Grype is like, there are 1,000 problems with all of your packages. Have a good day. And that's kind of hard feedback to act on, right? It's not obvious because Syft and Grype are sort of recursively searching for things like your depending on how you scan your transitive dependencies are in there, and so it could be that um, the vulnerable package is not one you installed directly, but one that something you installed. And so I wanted to brainstorm a little bit, like how we can do something with like this feature where we have a dependency graph in the SBOM to say like, hey, this thing you chose to install brought a lot of CVEs. This direct thing has a lot of indirect CVEs, and maybe you should upgrade it. Um, and I think there are a number of like ways we could build that feature. Some of them are a lot harder to build than others. And so my hope is to arrive at something that is not super hard to build, but pretty useful. Um,
Yeah, there's been some thinking in like the Grype 1.0 set of features that has to do with the output of Grype that I think plays into this kind of feature that you're talking about. So like today, the Grype output is matches. A match is a pair of a package and a vulnerability, and so it attempts to not be biased towards one or the other. It's not like we report out packages and here's your vulns. We don't report out here's your vulns and here are the packages that are affected. We say nope, there's a single tuple and it's coupling those two things together, and we have a list of those. Um, what we want to do is, in say Grype 1.0, is to provide like more options for introducing bias in the presentation. Like, I want to bias by, you know, I want to reorient everything by package, by vulnerability. And there's probably other things like by remediation, by action, by severity, by risk. As to where today, that's like sorting matches is what that translates into. And instead, if we're saying like, so back to your example, Will, like, well, let's just say I had, 100 dependencies, 1,000 CVEs, but like 500 of those was brought in by, a set of dependencies transitively. But like, if I kind of crawl the graph, it's like, well, actually there's these two dependencies, one direct and one indirect. If you updated those two, you get rid of half of your CVE. So like, that would be like, you know, being able to sort or orient your results by, your most actionable remediation, recommendations essentially. Like, here's the things you can do, and we've sorted them in a way. It's like if you do these in order, you're going to be able to either A, get rid of the riskiest things first, or B, get rid of the most things first. So, but like adding all these knobs in the output to convey it. But yeah, to what you're saying, we need to be able to search by it first to make those recommendations.
Yeah, and I think what I'd particularly like to propose today, because it's a pretty difficult feature to say, you have dependency foo that, you npm install foo, and it brought, 1100 CVEs, and if you upgrade it to the next version, there will only be 700, because that requires knowing a bunch of stuff. It requires knowing that there's a newer version of foo available. It requires knowing the set of dependencies that the new version of foo has, and it requires knowing what CVEs affect those newer dependencies, and then doing some like set operations. And that's actually like a whole giant feature that would be pretty hard to build, mostly because Grype would have to be able to do a hypothetical upgrade and say, like, what, like, if I moved this thing to the latest version, what does my dependency graph look like now? And what would the vulnerabilities on that graph be? Those are two huge hypotheticals that Greg isn't very close to doing the first of those today. So what I was thinking is that, what if there was instead a view that was just like a roll up, where we don't say if you upgrade foo, you will get rid of n CVEs. We just say the set of dependencies brought in by foo has a lot of CVEs. And that's just a way of sorting the data. And we're not saying, like, we don't know that, like, we're not necessarily like then we're just leaving it to the user to decide, is upgrading that package something they can take on at this time? Is there a new version of that package? Is it a lot better um if they upgrade? But it gives us sort of like sort by like what direct dependencies are driving the most matches or the most severe matches or something, I think is a reasonably good feature that we could build with data that Grype already has today. And so that's sort of what I wanted to talk through, is like, how much less useful does like, obviously in an ideal world, we'd give you the update command to run that is the most valuable, I think, like, in terms of risk reduction. But computing that is really hard. So what if instead we gave you the package to look hardest at, and then the user can figure out, is there an update available? Do I want to take on the risk of updating that? I think that simpler feature might still have 80 or 90% of the value of the much harder to build feature, and we're much closer to it because it just requires the current dependency graph and the current set of matches. It's really just a presentation over it. How do people feel about that idea?
I have one question. When you say direct dependencies, there could be a lot of different scenarios where there are direct dependencies, right? You could have, especially if you have like an accurate transitive dependency graph, you might have something that's down the chain somewhere, but has a lot of direct dependencies itself. And so it's not necessarily something that the user can do something about. But are you like, let me just ask one other quickly tangentially related thing, is like, is this mainly for like, if you're looking at a source repo, like what can I do as the maintainer of the source repo?
I think that that's a really good point. I think there's a lot of ecosystem differences in this, but I think many like language package managers have the feature where I ask for a package, and then it pulls in a million packages, right? I and those may or may not have CVEs, and so I think, like, having access to like the top level package manager manifest, right? Like the gem file or a requirements txt or whatever, not the lock file where everything is resolved, but the one where the user sort of declared their dependencies. So I think in an ideal world, it's like a user ran npm install X, and it resulted in more CVEs than npm install Y. So they should look at X before they look at Y. I think that's something we're closer to being able to build. And so then what I would like to do is get the way to approximate that, I think, is in the dependency graph, get to like roots of large subtrees that have lots of vulnerabilities, basically. Does that answer your question, Keith? Does that make sense?
I guess so, but I mean, what I'm trying to understand is like, if the purpose of this is to give the user something actionable, then like, if they're maintaining a program and we're doing a source scan, the only real action they have is the direct dependencies of their program, regardless of anything sort of further down. So like, I'm just trying to understand like where.
And
It depends on the ecosystem too, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it depends on how Syft drew the graph. But I think either like, I think if the artifact we scan, like if the program we scanned is the root of the graph, then its immediate children are things you can upgrade. If it's not, then we're looking for then we have like a forest, right? Or basically, and we're looking for roots of subtrees. So like, sort of, you say like, you find a CVE and you ask like, what dependency brought in this match, and then you ask what dependency brought in that dependency until you're out, and then you complain about that package. Does that make sense? You sort of try to go back as close to the root as you can, on the assumption that like the more direct a dependency is, the more likely you can upgrade it. So I think there'd have to be a lot of ecosystem specific searching, and it probably makes sense to like pick a popular ecosystem and try to build a specific, like, this does it for npm now or something, kind of search. But my hope is that, like, if we have a good dependency graph, then sort of climbing the graph to towards the root results in more direct dependencies of that the user has more control over. Does that make sense, Keith? Did I answer that?
I think so, but Chris, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, well, at the end of your statement, you touched on kind of what my question was about this, which was, at the end of the day, are we going to try our best to determine if the user has control over this or not? So if we can determine that it's like something, like let's say we're doing this ecosystem specific development, we find for whatever business rules for the ecosystem that a user couldn't update this, we kind of drop that from the recommendation and we go to the next highest thing that can be the most successful or most valuable. Because like, you're talking about the 90% of the feature being valuable. Is it the fact, the value derived from something that where the user can do the update? Because if we're just like giving them things like that they know, oh, this is 3 transitive layers deep, I can't touch this, I have to go knock on 2 different repos doors to get this updated, right? We're only focusing on what they could do locally on their machine or for their project.
I think the idea is that, like, basically, yeah, we're looking for like the most valuable update command that they could run. And the heuristic we're using is basically, we get as close to the root of the dependency graph as we can. And then from like things that are close to the root of the dependency graph, the one whose subtree has the most or worst CVEs is a valuable one to act on. And
yeah,
so
you could tier list those where at the top, run this update command, and oh, if you have more time, like these will also knock out X percentage of your whole vulnerability report that you see.
Right. And we don't know for sure they'll knock out X percentage of the vulnerability report. So basically what we're saying is, this package is close to the root of your dependency graph. That probably means that you chose it or chose the thing that immediately brought it in. Right. And so that's one. And this package's set of dependencies brought in a lot of vulns, so you should probably change something. And just sort of having those two facts as like a heuristic is the idea that like basically we should sort of report subtrees close to the root that have a lot of vulnerabilities that they brought in. That should be like a sort method or something.
I also want to call, like, for people later who are watching the live stream, Will said something super important there, but there's a lot of other important stuff after that. We don't know what percentage would be resolved with this feature, in the sense that we can predict for the dependency itself the matches against it, but we don't know upgrading what upgrades it made to the upgrades that are below it. So we only have like a half to like semi-truth of what the full vulnerability picture looks at like after this upgrade command, not the full truth. Is that right, Will?
Right, because what we don't know, and I apologize for speaking so abstractly. I should have like chased down some concrete examples. But what we don't know is if you upgrade package X, what will its dependency graph look like then? Is something that right now Grype has no idea about. And so
that's hard.
so we're sort of settling for right now, package X's dependency graph has a lot of vulnerabilities. As sort of a proxy for upgrading X might resolve a lot of vulnerabilities. And I think we'd have to do experiments to see whether that sort of bears out, but I think it probably does.
I think it's oh, sorry, Alex.
Go for it, Dan.
I was going to say, I think it's a really interesting topic, right? Because even a step in that direction, we're talking about an action feature, like being able to recommend something, but to Alex's earlier point, which I think I agree with, like that there's a step in between, which is to say, like, take what we have today, for example. We have an artifact relationship section in an SBOM that can construct a dependency relationship forest. Being able to annotate that with everything from this node down, roll up security findings and just sort of start to sum them up. You could imagine this graph having nodes with, it's a bit of a heat map all over the place, and try to figure out, if there's something, how, that alone, I think, is actually really interesting information. It's not recommending an action, but it is conveying some information to a user, where if you wanted to sort by that, it could sort by, these are the nodes that have the most security things underneath them, regardless of whether or not they're at a root. And then from there, try to develop other ways of deciding if a node is a root, or if it needs to be something the user can provide a hint into, or if there's missing relationships, some of that kind of stuff. I'm just saying it, like, just that piece of information alone sounds like a pretty interesting one. It's not recommending an action, but it is conveying interesting information. Like, these are the sources of more security findings than these other things, right? Which right now is hard to get from the output.
And I think there's even more knobs in here. So like say we go the direction of like finding the direct, so let's rank the direct dependencies that, or find these roots that we think, put these in order. These are gonna have the most impact in terms of getting rid of these known vulnerabilities for the current report, for the current dependency graph. But I think there's other perspectives that someone might want to bias it by, or our default might bias multiple things at the same time. So like, let's take, for example, I've got a really unbalanced tree. I've got two direct dependencies. I got the first one, I'll say A, has a ton of dependencies underneath it. It has, and I run Grype, and I find that all these transitive dependencies, there's like 100 minor, moderate CVEs that have been found and associated with this. Great. I definitely want to do something to upgrade this tree here. Now, on the other side, we'll say B, it's got one or two transitive dependencies, but one of them is Log4Shell. It's the one that should have been upgraded a year ago, 2 years ago. Like, it needs to be out now. And so, like, if we just say, oh, I've upgraded, this one direct dependency that got rid of 100 of these CVEs. I still want to be able to convey like, well, no, I go do this one first because it's the one with log for shell. Do B first. So there's some balancing of like, it's the most impact in terms of getting rid of the number of CVEs, and it's probably the ones like, what are the ones that are also the most severe, and that can be in terms of like CVSS severity, it could be in terms of like EPSS, the most likely to be,
Yeah.
leveraged in the next 30 days. It could be for risk, a balancing of those two things together. So I think it's going to be multifaceted, and so whatever knob we have is going to have multiple dials there for how you bias these subtrees.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that like the goal is to report sort of the riskiest subtree, right? Like if somebody hacks your app, it's going to be because of this subtree of dependencies kind of thing. But we can't exactly know that. And so it's a question of like, do we want to just do a kev count, right? Show me the subtree with the most, that known exploited vulnerabilities in it. Show me the subtree. Maybe we can come up with some stats way of aggregating EPSS or aggregating severity or something. I agree with Alex here. There need to be like
knobs,
probably several knobs for like weighting how we do it. But I think doing something, I think this feature is sort of within reach today, because I think if Grype is acting, at least if it's given like a Syft SBOM or another SBOM that has some dependency graph information to it, we could try to aggregate matches based on the position in the graph today. There's some presentation considerations, but
yeah, and that's the one that I was talking about at the top of the call, where it's like, I think in Grype 1, we're going to have a lot more -O options there, where it's like, it might be like -O packages, -O risk, and like something that like, it's going to be orienting the output in a way that can, so actually one of them might just be like -O, like package remediation, where it's like, hey, we listed 2 things. It's the 2 actions we think you should take. It would be the output of the analysis wheel that you're talking about, and then like, nested within that would be the kind of classical matches, or it would be the set of packages, or it would be the set of CDs, or all the above.
Yeah. Okay. And I think it'd be cool to keep looking at that. But I think we've got some consensus that this is a really valuable thing to build, even if we don't immediately or don't ever solve the problem of knowing what the graph looks like post upgrade, because that's a really hard problem.
I would argue it's not possible without shelling out the tooling.
Yeah.
Because like the way that like Go solves, it does version selection is totally different than how Python does it, totally different from how Java does it. And it's like, us saying that we would have even correct methods to guess that, I feel like would always be wrong and would always have edge cases that would fail. And in fact, even if you were to shell out to some of this tooling, I think you still have this weird, like you could like get the report that, shelled out of this tooling to say like, oh, yep, we would get rid of everything. And then you run the same thing an hour later to actually, do the effect of doing the upgrade. And it's no longer right anymore. So there's a different answer like an hour later. So it's I don't think just because like TV entered the world, but because like the package graph has changed in some subtle way. So
yeah, I think at best it could be a hint, but it's unlikely to ever be like super accurate.
Right. Okay.
But
cool.
I mean, it's very interesting. So I feel like maybe we can conclude this discussion for now by saying, I agree, Will, it's a nice topic. And if folks watching are interested in, this type of experiment, one thing I'd like to say is it's probably a good idea to go to this ticket and choose one of the ecosystems that has a check mark next to it, because that's going to mean there's better artifact relationship information for these ecosystems in Syft SBOMs to try to do
also,
this experiment.
If you're looking to do a deep dive on one of the ecosystems and it's not checked off, that's a signal too that you can go hang out, learn some new stuff.
Yep.
And I'll foreshadow, like, so like I've been lovingly calling this issue the Christmas tree issue, because like the labels on the far right, just like every color under the sun here, like Christmas tree lights. But I mean, so in the near future, like this, so right now, this is the best place to go to get all the information for like relationship capabilities for Syft, which is not ideal. It's just kind of happenstance, because this is trying to deal with describing them for another feature, for another issue. But in the near future, you'll be able to go to a doc site so I don't know when that's going to occur, but right now it's in development, where we have this exact same information, but in a better presentation and a better source of truth. So right now, this is like a GitHub issue description, which, might not change even though the source of truth underneath it changes, but the doc site, that won't be the case. So
Nice.
foreshadow for the future. Near future, I should say.
Excellent. Okay, with that, what do you guys say? Do you want to move on to another topic? Sounds good.
Let's do it.
Let's jump over to PRs that need discussion. Let's see what we got here today. I'll just refresh this, make sure I have the latest. And see where we're at. These are
I really
sorted.
thought that the enable deterministic output was one that was already merged. Oh, is that
For
a-
SPDX, yeah, I
so-
thought we put this one in.
or I'm thinking of the wrong thing.
It might have been for a different format.
Was it Grype, like timestamp or something?
That might be what I'm thinking of. Let's see. What is this? Yeah, I'm thinking of something else entirely. What is this?
Let's take a look. Source date epoch UUID v5.
So, I mean, I guess we generate IDs for things, but a lot of the IDs that we generate aren't UUIDs. They're based on the package hash, which is deterministic based on the data in a package. But some things are UUID. I think the document itself has,
Yeah, document namespace.
a document namespace, which is the UUID at the end. And I guess what they're asking for is for that to be configurable.
We also came to conclusion on this one during the live stream. It just got behind because there's been a bunch of other priorities to get in over the past month or two. But my comment is basically a summary of what we have to do for this. Well, 2 comments.
Yep. Let's see if there was a since then. Let's see.
No, it was just an update telling them we haven't forgotten it. We have what we need to do on it. We just need to
Okay.
prioritize it and get it in.
Okay. So it doesn't, maybe needs discussion is the wrong label for this one at this point.
Yeah, I just removed the needs discussion from it. We just didn't take it off during our last live stream, so it was mislabeled.
Okay.
I'm gonna assign myself to this one because I have a couple of community PRs that I'm on right now that need to get across the line. So I'll put that into a higher priority than just sitting in the muck.
Yeah, I do remember talking about this one. Yeah. So, okay, good.
Do we
That
have
was
a
good.
sense
Good.
of how,
Oh, go ahead.
do we have a sense of how close to the finish line this one is?
Yeah. So let me go to the bottom real quick. We need to take these changes and make them symmetrical with Cyclone DX so that we can do it on both sides. As in, like, we can apply the deterministic UUID to that as well. And then we want to make sure that it's unique via SHA-1, because there was something that we talked about a little bit on our last live stream when this came up, that we wanted to make sure that there was no collision, or that we're not calculating it for something that can be replicated across like the unequal documents. And then we need to change the option name on the env variable, because I think right now it's not named correctly. But what we wanted something that communicated deterministic UUID, that's being set for the namespace and not for packages.
And what's the stuff in Cyclone that would need to be done and to be kind of like symmetrical? I mean, because it could be that, I'm kind of debating in my head, like, well, does that land with this PR or does it land with another PR? And the only reason that why I have the urge to like, oh, let's get the SPDX stuff in and then save the Cyclone for the next PR. The only resistance I have to that thought is, well, maybe there's a top level config option. So right now, this is introducing 2 new config options for like SPDX JSON specifically, and is it JSON? I have to look more carefully, but it looks like it's SPDX specific. Actually, no, it looks like it's saying SPDX JSON specifically. It would be out of these 2 new fields, but like it makes me feel like there's a higher level option that's like preserve determinism or be deterministic. I don't know what that config option would be, but it would actually wire multiple lower level config options. So in other words, if somebody is setting the deterministic EUID and not created time, it's probably a mistake. They probably didn't mean to do that. Same thing for the other way around. If they did created time to be set, but they didn't do the deterministic EUID, that feels like it's probably a mistake, unless I'm missing a use case here. But that hints at like the configuration itself could be either unified or maybe made more simply. And that's kind of coupled to the how to do this in Cyclone. Would Cyclone have the same options? Would it not have a different set, or could they just be all tied together in one big config option? That's like the things that's making me trying to understand the scope. Like, is this just SPDX? Thus, it's pretty close, or is it like going to be this Cyclone and rethinking the config options here? In which case, it's further away. I don't know if any of that resonated with folks or not.
Well, this is certainly not the first ask we've had for deterministic output for things. So, I mean, I think that you're absolutely right that there's some top level something there, but I think your intuition is probably right, that looking at what it should be in Cyclone DX is the right thing to do to understand what the top level thing should be.
Or could be.
Or could be.
Well, so Chris, if you're taking this one on, it sounds like that's the next.
No, but I also agree. I agree that when we already came to this conclusion in the live stream where we discussed this, which is I don't think the Cyclone DX work is being done in this. I think it's just a new issue that captures exactly those thoughts that you just said, Alex, for Cyclone DX, since we're implementing this for SPDX in this PR, and then figuring out what does the next PR look like to get compatible feature parity between the formats is what I'm trying to say. So
yeah, well, and it might be that in order to make that path smoother, maybe those 2 options that are there now, SPDX JSON.deterministic UID and SPDX JSON.created time, really just turns into like SPDX JSON dot something, like to be deterministic. I don't know what it is, but like just maybe it's just one switch here, because then that's easier to kind of figure out how to wire, with Cyclone too. Unless someone can think of a reason why you'd want to set one and not the other. I haven't been able to think of a reason yet, but
the weirdness is that I think a lot of times we need to pass in a specific value that gets output in the SBOM, like the time. We could do something like default to what, like January 1st, 1970 or something, right? But like that wouldn't be useful at all. So like I think that's the issue of like kind of needing specific things. But just one thought here is, like, a lot of things we do tend to like start with the very specific options, like cataloger configs, and then once we do introduce things, we do the multi-level configuration for all those things. So I would think it would be fine to move forward with this, but
yeah, that all resonates. I agree. I recant some.
Thank you, Dan, for highlighting this one, because now it's in the queue actually to get tackled and not in the void of do we see this when we do our jump into PRs kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think so there was an action on this remove the needs discussion because it's just it's in a different state. So that's good.
Yep,
Nice. Yeah.
it's off. It's on our board now. It's being tracked for this week as far as community PR reviews to get in.
That was a pretty cool comment on that one too. The community member is saying like, "Hey, this will really help the healthcare industry." Like, hey,
I hope
that's
so.
cool. Yes, please.
But also apologies for the delay on it because I know we discussed it before but didn't get across the line.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, well let's jump back over to what's next on the PRs. What do we got here? What about this?
UNC Windows Path?
Do you want to take a look
no.
at that? Is there something? You guys tell me.
Let's see.
Tell us how you really feel. Let's see. Yeah, for me, it's whenever I see Windows, right? So
Yeah.
tinnitus just sets in, right? Failure. So what is the failure to scan UNC Windows path anyway?
Want to check it out? Okay. We'll go there.
I do think we've talked about this one before. I think the thing has to do with if you do like / host name, some stuff, it like you can do network requests to other computers on Windows, and
right.
something about that is getting munged in a way that it doesn't work.
Interesting. Today I learned.
Right, I remember. So let's see what the latest discussion topic is, because it still has needs discussion on it. I just want to make sure if there's discussion that's needed, that's...
No, I popped needs discussion on here because I gave this a review and it looked good. Like it looked good. I tested it and I made sure on my Windows machine that like the volume mount was working as correctly without the separation of the colon / anymore. But I wanted like just some feel good vibes from core maintainers. I didn't want Keith did a review on it. I did a review on it. So I wanted like a group. Yes, let's do it. Let's merge this. And because I've been bitten before by solo merging path things where I didn't check some of the nuances around it.
Well, I mean, it just sounds like it's just fixing a bug, and yeah, we should probably merge it from a very cursory review. I have not reviewed this in detail, so and I don't know enough about this feature in Windows to begin with, so I'm kind of the last person to ask for this one.
Yeah, I guess...
Is this related to the other PR we have open for the?
Was there any concerns for the cross-platform tooling with this, or is that past us now?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest concern that I have is just that we're not running any tests on Windows. And so like we just have a big blind spot for merging anything that's trying to fix something on Windows because we don't have anything that verifies it. We don't know if we break it later. So
But wouldn't this require even if we had CI running Windows, like this requires a network mount. So it's like this isn't like a reasonable thing to really test in CI anyway. So it's the integration test is, meaning somebody trying it out with Chris. If you tried it and it seemed like it worked. I don't even have a Windows box, so I'm in the blind here.
No, I have my Windows subsystem, and I just did a small network mount on my local network for my machine that basically runs everything for my house, and I could scan it with the new paths, so it seemed good.
Yeah. So maybe
like
maybe it's in a state of like if we could do a review, and if it doesn't look like it's going to break something else, like let's maybe move it forward.
We're definitely on that. We're definitely beyond that step because it's just localizing the Windows path functions, and it's not it's not touching anything else as far as the core Syft functionality.
But does it? Is it scoped enough that it could interfere with other Windows path things? I think that's sort of the risk. Does this break? Because we don't have good CI coverage on Windows, I think that the risk is that this causes some sort of other subtle Windows path regression. Path handling is really subtle in Syft because like in sort of a regular program that's not crossing file systems, you just use the standard libraries thing for file paths, and it's using backslashes on Windows and forward slashes, and it knows that you have percent app data on Windows and the home environment variable on Linux or whatever. And the because Syft could be like running on Windows but scanning an OCI image or a tarball or something, there's a lot of like normalization. Like, is this a path to the host? Is this a path within the artifact? So I just wanted to call out like why we have to sort of be extra careful with path manipulation PRs. Like one bug we've had in the past is like when we scan the artifact, we always like stereoscope always normalizes to forward slashes and paths, but then for like finding a config file on the host, we like didn't do that right or something. And so you always have to be careful, like pre-normalization or post-normalization, host or scan target. So yeah, I think that was a really long way of saying I will feel a lot better about this sort of change once there is Windows CI that at least makes sure it doesn't break anything else. Like, it's fine to do a one-time test that it works. I think the value of CI is the ongoing test that it doesn't regress things besides what it's adding. And like maybe this particular one is fine. I haven't looked at this PR. I'll just feel better when we have a Windows box running in CI.
Right, and I think that's sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Because we have coverage in terms of like unit tests for processing Windows paths, but I think the ask is like just running all of our existing tests on Windows, in which case, yeah, there's something coming down the pipe for that. So
right, or even just the CLI test, right? Just like go get like build the current Syft binary and run it on Windows, like execute it, point it in directories and stuff.
Just some smoke tests.
Yeah. Right, because probably if we break Windows path handling, it'll just like we'll probably break all of it, or so. Anyway,
I mean, Keith, you've got coming down the pipe. You have one repo ported over to like the way our CR patterns are working to enable doing more cross-platform tests, and that's in the Chronicle repo, I think.
I've got a handful of things now, but yeah, Chronicle is one for sure.
Yeah, and I know, I think I volunteered to help out with like porting over either like the Syft or Grype or GrypeDB repos, because like I think the next step there is to get to the endpoint that Will you're describing, like, hey, if we just have this running on Windows and CI, even if it didn't have a volume mount, it'd be fine. That'd be good enough. I think that the state we're in is like, well, there's a bunch of things in our existing task file.yaml at the root of the repo that just needs to get ported over to Go. Because the new approach that Keith wrote over in the other repos was, hey, if we have a lot of these steps running in Go is cross-platform. It's very easy to execute and do all of these very simple tasks and repetitive tasks in Go, as opposed to like, having a task file.yaml that says, well, if you're on Windows, do this. If you're on Mac, do this. If you're on, and run these specific shell commands that all are subtly different or sometimes completely different. There's a set of tasks in our task file that like make that challenging, and I think I put out my hand to put in a few hours to help in that effort out, but.
Yeah.
Do we block this on that effort, or do we want to try to way to get this cross efficiently? Because I know, like Chris, you've already tried it on your box.
I think manual. I think if we do manual smoke testing of like other Windows things before merge, I would be comfortable. Because this person needs this and they built it. And I don't want to block, like, it's not their fault that we didn't set up Windows and CI. We should have done it a long time ago. So I think I'd be comfortable with just with some extra testing of like, do other Windows things work still?
Then I think maybe the plan forward, like, Chris, if you still got that Windows box, just running unit tests, CLI tests, as just
Local, yeah.
running make unit, make CLI does that function. And if it doesn't, maybe it's worth raising. If it doesn't, definitely raise it up, because then maybe we've got a testing issue on Windows itself.
Yeah.
But I think just reporting back on this PR, like, hey, I ran these two things and it functioned. I think I deleted my Windows VM, which it takes a while to go get that again. So, do you still have it, Chris, or is it?
Oh yeah, I've got it.
Yeah.
We're ready. I can run it. I've signed it myself.
Yeah.
I'm just making a comment that says at Chris is running these locally on Windows to validate in lieu of CI being set up for his boxes. Will merge on confirmation.
Well, that's Chris.
I'm also going to go ahead and remove the needs discussion. So I think discussion was needed and discussion was had. So there we go.
Yeah, I just like, if you see something, say something. I put needs discussion on here to raise, get the team's eyes on it. So
absolutely, that was the discussion. Excellent. Let's see. How about we pop over to the needs discussion issues? We've got about 12 minutes or so left in our live session today. If that helps kind of scope what we want to talk about next. Probably room for another meaty one. What do we got?
Well, did we talk about the top one last time? I mean, we had a community member. Yeah, that's right. Because last Thursday he joined for the office hours, and then on the live stream we chatted about it. So never mind. Okay.
The vault.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Support scanning files and other mount namespaces.
I think we discussed that. Yeah, I think we discussed that, and we just decided that we should just special case in the file cataloger. Like, if you give us a path to a file and we can read it, we don't care what mount namespace it's in. But when scanning directories, Syft does a lot of work to avoid scanning /proc and scanning /dev, and so. Looks like this is in review, so probably this just doesn't need discussion anymore.
Yep, I think that's right. So should we remove the needs discussion? Because I remember this discussion as well.
yeah, you can take it off on that one.
Let's do that. Excellent. Let's see. Oh, I'm actually on page 2. That's part of why I was confused by what I was seeing there.
Yeah, we already discussed that first one. We did that first.
Yep.
Yeah, the HTTPD tools one might not be super fast, but it's at least pretty well defined.
Let's take a look.
So I've been talking to the user on this. So basically, RPMs often have what's called a source RPM. So they have a note that's like, hey, this was built from this other thing. And so HTTPD tools, which has stuff like load testers and other, it's got a bunch of command line tools for checking on HTTP servers. But it has the source RPM HTTPD, which is like a web server that has lots of CVEs. It's a web server. It has CVEs about SSL downgrade bugs or whatever, because web servers just accumulate, because they sit on the edge and anybody can send a byte to them, so they just accumulate CVEs. And I think that, so the problem here basically is that Red Hat and a lot of other sort of distros disclose vulnerabilities against the source RPM, right? And so rather than saying every RPM built from the HTTPD source is vulnerable, we just say the HTTPD source is vulnerable. And so then Grype is basically looking at something and says, hey, the source RPM is HTTPD, and that is affected by the CVE. and I don't know different, so I'm gonna report this to CVE. And so like a human reading this might think like HTTPD tools is not really HTTPD. Maybe we shouldn't report it. Um, and so maybe there's just nothing we can do about this. We've been talking to like other
Well,
uh go ahead, sorry.
yeah. I mean, this is a long-standing topic, right? And it's not so much about the technology as it is, in my opinion, about the fidelity of the data source. Like to your point, Will, I think we're still. I want to test this assertion because I haven't looked as closely as I think you guys have in recent times, but I think we are still in the world where the most information we have from a distro vendor, in this case Red Hat, when it comes to the vulnerability data, is that there's one source. It doesn't necessarily mean source code. It's just like one thing called HTTPD, and from that there are n actual RPMs that you might have installed on your system, and that includes like headers, the devel packages, sometimes tools, sometimes they have things called file systems, sometimes there's the server and client, like whatever it is. There's not a structure for that, but it's just all of the HTTP source material is in one place, but you will rarely have that actual package installed. You'll have something derived from it. If it happens to be that the package derived from it has the same name as the source RPM, it creates confusion. But at the end of the day, the vulnerability source says, we don't know which of these derived packages has this vulnerability in it. It could be any of them, and it could be multiple of them. Therefore, we're reporting the vulnerability against the material from which all of these actual RPMs are derived. And if that is still the case in the vulnerability data, then I'm not sure there's a whole lot that can be done to go further than that, because the information doesn't exist to make the decision as to whether or not a vulnerability is in derived package A and not derived package B. But I wanted to test that. Is there more information now, or are we still there?
No, I think we're still there.
Yeah.
And I think where many data feeds are is they report sort of source or upstream packages that are vulnerable, and then they might report a list of like binary, like downstream installable packages that got rebuilt, but that we can't really like the fact that it was rebuilt doesn't mean it used to be vulnerable. And the fact that it's built from that source doesn't mean it is vulnerable, but we don't have better fidelity data. So I think this is still pretty stuck. And this is why in like the Grype config, you can just say, don't talk to me about CVE 1234 for HTTPD tools. I like that's sort of why we have like user level suppression mechanisms. And I get it that it's frustrating because the CVE probably doesn't really affect this. But I think, anyway, I just wanted to sort of talk through why it was like this. Keith was wondering if there's something we could do, because sometimes there is this pattern where like there's something that's really not probably affected by it, right? Like there's HTTPD-debug info, right? Which is an RPM that has the debugger symbols for the web server, which is like, it probably doesn't have a CVE on its own because it's not really a thing on its own.
I'm still waiting for the man page to be vulnerable. I've yet to find an example, but one of these days there's going to be a vulnerable man page.
Right, and so
we've definitely done this before. But the thing is, it's all by convention, right? So like,
right.
dash headers, there's a convention that only has .h files in it, but it's not necessarily the case. And here's a weird one. Sometimes there have been vulnerabilities in the pre-install, post-install scripts of the package itself. So that throws a wrench into the entire heuristic.
Yeah. Right, and that's
really hard. It's an edge case, but we have to look at this as like, is there a decision that can be made that can like nail the problem, or is it not always covering it, right?
Right. And so,
Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go for it, Will.
Right. So it sounds like we can't really, like, if we wanted to have a rule like you ignore dash tools or something, we're just going to miss something in container tools that's actually vulnerable or whatever. And so it's not. It seems like maybe we don't have a good path forward here, which
Well,
is a bummer. I think the original requester on this issue sort of understands that, and
Yeah.
I agree with them. In an ideal world, this sub package would have a separate vulnerability lifecycle, but that requires some security researcher to like prove that the vulnerable code doesn't link into the sub package or whatever, and that like
I
that would be
do.
a lot of work. So go ahead. Sorry.
About that, there's, I mean, on that other issue we talked about last week, for like essentially we said, hey, the issue is about reachability analysis, and like that's where the contributors are working on that proof of concept. I guess he posted it a few days ago, and so he had made the suggestion like, well, nowadays, we could probably extract some of this information. It might not be reliable, but we might be able to have some amount of confidence on like, hey, a function was referenced, a symbol was referenced, some very small technical detail was referenced, which maybe we can discern from an artifact. And I'm saying this as a hypothetical, not as something we could actually do right now, but like maybe there's some path where, there's a subset of NVD descriptions that we can mine out information that is like a function name, a symbol, etc. And then we can go look at those specific artifacts to see like, okay, I see that they're describing, this CVE is described for, Red Hat and this RHSA. It affects these binary packages. Here's the source package. And so in theory, someone could take that evidence and say, does that correlate with which of these binary packages relative to the source? It would be a ton of work.
Mm-hmm.
But and also, I don't think it would. I think the problem is, step one, you're mining like very low level information from what is like NVD descriptions. But if somebody knew of a data set that was, kind of a sidetracking NVD data with some low level technical information, that would be highly valuable. The closest I've seen is the Vuln Hub, I think, or Vol Hub, I think, where they recreate reproducible container images for specific CVEs.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't quite do the trick, but
Yeah. There have been some data sets that have been done for security research, and they're awesome, but they don't continue, right? So they're the ones I've found are always like a massive effort to get a large data set at a point in time. Doesn't mean we can't use that to learn something and train up a heuristic, but I haven't yet encountered one that's like actively maintained from an authoritative source. And I do think there's an authority aspect to this that's important too.
yeah, I mean,
But Vex might come to the rescue here. I am actually interested. Maybe we can, in our next conversation with our Red Hat security team, like inquire as to whether or not there's a possibility to be using Vex as a mechanism to communicate from a source package and all of it's derived for a given vulnerability. Perhaps there's a way to communicate through a Vex assessment which ones don't have that vulnerability. Like, it might be an interesting topic. I don't know if that would land, but it might be interesting.
Well,
So,
I guess we're at time. I had another idea, but maybe I'll let it flow into the ether and be forgotten.
Well, in that case, let's leave needs discussion on this, but it looks like from the user's perspective, this is somewhat concluded through information sharing and the topic that was discussed on the ticket, which is good. But yes, we are at time, so thanks for reminding us, Alex. But I think with that, maybe we'll sign off for today. Thank you all again, as always, for joining us, and we will see you next week or online.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Bye.